At 61, Johnny Depp is finally speaking in a way he never dared to before. After years of silence, exile, and bruising public battles, he has begun revealing the truth behind the choices that once confused the world. The man who spent decades living in the glare of Hollywood now admits that the life people imagined for him was never the life he actually lived. What he shares today exposes wounds that fame never healed and confirms what millions quietly suspected about his disappearance. This is not a confession for sympathy. It is Johnny Depp's attempt to reclaim the pieces of himself that were lost long before the world noticed he was gone. The disappearance from Hollywood. In 2023, Johnny Depp made a decision that stunned everyone who had followed his life for decades. Without a farewell interview, without a red carpet goodbye, and without a single public explanation, he packed up his home in Los Angeles and quietly moved to Somerset, England. One day he was a Hollywood fixture. The next he was gone, leaving behind an industry that once depended on him. Fans searched for sightings. Reporters waited for statements, but nothing came. For nearly a full year, there wasn't a single confirmed photograph of him at any event, airport, or studio. The man who had once been impossible to avoid had become invisible. But his disappearance was not an act of mystery, it was an act of survival. Depp later explained in a rare local interview that he wasn't trying to hide. He was trying to heal. "I'm not trying to be seen anymore. I'm trying to find peace," he said. A short sentence that traveled across social media within hours, revealing more about his state of mind than any press conference ever could. Behind those words was a man who had spent years fighting accusations, betrayals, studio rejections, and devastating personal losses. The silence he sought in Somerset was not a retreat from the world. It was the first step toward reclaiming the parts of himself that Hollywood had worn down. Life in Somerset was not glamorous. He lived on an estate spanning more than 800,000 square meters, but he lived quietly, waking before dawn, taking slow walks, and reading outdoors as if reconnecting with ordinary moments he hadn't felt in decades. Those close to him said he barely spoke during the first months after the move, not out of anger, but exhaustion. For a man who had lived half his life being photographed, analyzed, criticized, and adored, the quiet countryside felt like the first place where he could breathe again. Yet even in this isolation, something unexpected began growing. Depp was not vanishing, he was rebuilding. And the first sign of that rebirth appeared on canvas, not on camera. Painting his pain. The art of Johnny Depp. While the world wondered whether Johnny Depp had retired, he was quietly pouring everything he couldn't say aloud onto canvas. Painting had always existed in the background of his life, but after 2022 it became something else entirely, a form of therapy, a way to process years of emotional turmoil that he had carried in silence. In Somerset, far from the noise of Hollywood, he began creating pieces that were raw, surreal, and hauntingly intimate. These works reflected the fractures of a man who had walked through betrayal, public humiliation, and the collapse of an identity he had built over 40 years. When his collection titled A Bunch of Stuff debuted in New York in 2024, it didn't simply draw attention, it stunned people. Collectors who had followed his career expected familiar pop art portraits, but what they saw instead were dreamlike, fractured images full of empty spaces, muted tones, and distant faces. These were not the paintings of a man seeking applause. They were the paintings of a man putting his soul back together piece by piece. Limited edition prints sold for up to $50,000 each, many purchased even before the exhibition officially opened. Within months, sales exceeded $5 million, proving that even outside Hollywood, Depp's voice remained powerful, just delivered in a different language. Critics noticed the emotional weight behind his work. Some described it as visual silence, others as the mourning of a man still breathing. But for Depp, it wasn't about praise or interpretation. He once told a close friend that painting allowed him to say things he couldn't articulate in interviews, things about heartbreak, betrayal, and the feeling of being misunderstood for years. His quiet life in Somerset had given him the clarity to express grief without interruption. Yet art wasn't the only part of his soul calling him back. Music, the first love of his youth, soon returned to him with a familiar pull. And when he picked up a guitar again, something in him shifted, as if another door to healing had opened. Music and healing with Hollywood vampires. Music had been Johnny Depp's first escape long before fame, long before films, and long before the tabloids turned his life into a battleground. So when he drifted away from Hollywood, it was only natural that he found his way back to the one thing that had always felt honest. Reuniting with Alice Cooper and Joe Perry, Depp returned to the stage with Hollywood vampires, but this time he wasn't performing for adrenaline or reputation. He was performing to breathe again. Their European tour became an unexpected turning point. On stage, Depp no longer moved with the wild energy of his Jack Sparrow years. Instead, he played guitar with a calm focus, as though every note steadied him. Audiences at festivals like Germany's Wacken Open Air and venues across France noticed the shift. This was a man using music not to entertain, but to heal. When the band performed David Bowie's Heroes, Depp's voice carried a softness that fans had never heard from him before. It didn't sound like a tribute. It sounded like survival. Behind the scenes, bandmates described him as quieter, more reflective, often sitting alone with his guitar long after rehearsals ended. He no longer drank, no longer chased the chaotic nightlife that had once defined him. Since late 2022, Depp had chosen sobriety, not through rehab or public declarations, but through a private decision to reclaim control over his body and mind. The change was visible. He had lost weight, his eyes looked clearer, and the tension that once shadowed his face had softened. Locals in Somerset often saw him walking before dawn, stopping by the small library he supported, or reading alone in his garden. These routines grounded him, allowing music to become something gentle again, not a performance, but a meditation. During a private sound check, Depp told a friend, "I don't have anything left to shout about. Stillness is louder." And for the first time in years, his life finally matched those words. Yet as he rebuilt himself through art and music, the wounds from the past didn't simply disappear. The trial, the accusations, the public betrayal, they still lived inside him. And facing them meant confronting the darkest chapter of his life. Facing the past, the Amber Heard trial and its aftermath. No part of Johnny Depp's life left a deeper scar than the years he spent trapped in a legal and emotional war with Amber Heard. What began in May 2016 with allegations of abuse quickly spiraled into one of the most public and brutal controversies in modern Hollywood. Depp said nothing at first, believing the truth would rise on its own. Instead, silence became his enemy. Studios cut ties before any evidence was examined. Disney removed him from Pirates of the Caribbean, and Warner Brothers asked him to step away from Fantastic Beasts. Headlines around the world labeled him guilty before a single day in court. By 2018, the damage deepened when The Sun published an article calling him a wife-beater. Depp sued for libel in the UK, hoping to clear his name, but lost in 2020, a defeat that shattered his reputation even further. Tabloids portrayed him as unstable, washed up, or lost in addiction. He withdrew, avoiding interviews and disappearing from Hollywood events. Those close to him later revealed he felt betrayed not only by Heard, but also by an industry that had once celebrated him. Friends saw him pacing, drinking, and punching walls in private frustration. Every rumor felt like another weight crushing down. Then came the turning point. In early 2020, a leaked audio recording revealed Heard admitting to hitting Depp and mocking his reactions. Overnight, the public narrative shifted. Millions shared the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp, demanding the world re-examine the truth it had so quickly accepted. And so, in 2022, Depp filed a defamation lawsuit in Virginia, not out of revenge, but to reclaim his voice. Over 6 weeks, the trial unfolded like a documentary of their broken relationship. Depp described losing the tip of his finger after a bottle was thrown. He recounted years of emotional torment. More than 30 witnesses testified, some claiming Heard often acted aggressively. When the jury ruled in Depp's favor, the verdict felt monumental. But it did not restore him. It merely closed a door that had stayed open too long. After the trial, Depp isolated himself for 2 months, barely speaking to anyone. In a private letter, he wrote, "I didn't fight to win. I fought to survive." The legal victory had cleared his name, but the emotional wounds ran far deeper. And yet, even after losing so much, a quiet shift began. One that would slowly guide him back into the world, not as a redeemed star, but as a rebuilt man. A quiet rebirth, life in Somerset, and the man he became. After the trial ended in 2022, something inside Johnny Depp fundamentally changed. The shouting matches, the sleepless nights, the fear of being misunderstood. He stopped carrying those battles with him. Instead, he stepped into a life shaped by stillness, the kind of stillness he hadn't known since childhood. Somerset became the refuge he never realized he needed. Locals spoke of a man who moved slowly, kindly, almost anonymously. They often saw him walking at sunrise, stopping to read in his garden, or quietly donating books to the village library. For the first time in decades, Johnny Depp was simply living, not performing. He changed physically, too. He grew leaner, not because of pressure from Hollywood, but because he had begun taking care of himself again. A local doctor who monitored his routine health checks confirmed that Depp's liver had improved, his heart was stable, and he showed no signs of returning to old habits. He had been sober since late 2022, not through public declarations or formal rehab, but through a private promise he made to himself. Those who met him in Somerset often described a sense of calm around him, a steadiness that felt foreign to the man who once embodied Hollywood's wildness. His emotional transformation became even clearer during an art event in France. When a reporter gently asked about Amber Heard, everyone in the room braced for discomfort. Instead, Depp paused, looked directly at the reporter, and answered with measured softness, "The past is over. It's time to move on." The response stunned people not because of what he said, but how he said it, with no anger, no defensiveness, no bitterness. It was the voice of a man who had finally stopped rehearsing his pain. The years of scandal, betrayal, and heartbreak no longer controlled him. He wasn't seeking revenge, redemption, or Hollywood's approval. He wasn't trying to rebuild an old version of himself. He was learning to exist without the weight of fame pressing against his chest. And yet, even as he embraced this new, quiet identity, something unexpected began pulling him back into the world he thought he had left behind. Because for the first time in a long time, the work he chose didn't demand a performance. It offered meaning. Returning on his own terms. Jean du Barry, Day Drinker, and What Comes Next. Johnny Depp's return to cinema was not explosive or triumphant. It was intentional. In 2023, after nearly a year of near-total silence, he stepped onto the stage at the Cannes Film Festival for the premiere of Jean du Barry. It was his first major public appearance since the trial, and when the film ended, the room rose to its feet in a 7-minute standing ovation. It wasn't merely applause for a performance. It was recognition of a man who had survived years of public dissection and still found the strength to create. Director Mai Wen later explained she chose him not because of controversy, but because no one else could bring King Louis XV to life the way he did. The performance marked more than a comeback. It signaled a shift in how Depp selected his roles. Gone were the blockbuster expectations, the franchise pressures, and the Hollywood machine. He no longer wanted to play versions of who the industry thought he should be. He wanted roles that mirrored the truths he had lived. That opportunity arrived when director Mark Webb offered him a part in Daydrinker, a somber, introspective drama co-starring Penelope Cruz. Webb described the character not as a hero or villain, but as a wound drifting through his own life. And in Webb's words, Depp was the only actor who could embody that kind of vulnerability. Soon after, Terry Gilliam approached him with something even more unconventional, the role of Satan in Carnival at the End of Days. Gilliam called Depp uniquely equipped to portray darkness with an inner calm, a balance few actors possess. Depp didn't rush to accept the role, nor did he bask in the sudden wave of interest. He simply stayed still, reminding those around him that he no longer needed Hollywood. If he returned, it would be for the art, not the applause. What defined this chapter was not the work alone, but the way he approached it. There was no desperation to reclaim status, no hunger for vindication. He was choosing slowly, carefully, on his own terms. Each project reflected a man who had shed the identities forced on him and emerged as someone quieter, wiser, and more grounded. Where his path leads next remains uncertain, even to him, but for once, the uncertainty feels like freedom. Because Johnny Depp is no longer chasing a career. He is living a life. Johnny Depp's journey has been filled with loss, reinvention, and a quiet strength that no one saw coming. At 61, he isn't trying to reclaim old glory. He's finally choosing a life that belongs to him. And now that he has revealed truths the world long suspected, one question remains for us all. Do you think Johnny Depp should ever return to Hollywood, or should he continue the peaceful life he's built? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more powerful stories like this one.